Welcome back to a Timey-Wimey pod where we watch every episode of Doctor Who from 2005 onwards. My name's Rebecca.
I'm Haley.
And today we are discussing Series 3, Episode 2, The Shakespeare Code.
And we are together in person for today's episode.
This is only our second time ever recording in person.
Yeah, usually we do it virtually, so it's very exciting to do this in person together.
Definitely. Are you ready for some fantastic facts?
Yes, I am.
Alrighty, this episode aired April 7th, 2007, and was written by Gareth Roberts and directed by Charlie Palmer. Now, a fun fact, Doctor Who is the first television drama that was given permission to film inside the Globe Theatre.
Really?
Mm-hmm. But they were only allowed to shoot at nights.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. This episode had a few different titles. It was originally titled Love Labours 1, and it was also briefly titled Theatre of Doom.
Ooh, interesting. I kind of like Love Labours 1, but I do like they stuck with and chose the Shakespeare Code.
I like Theatre of Doom, but yeah, the Shakespeare Code is good. They did that kind of in reference of the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's one scene that didn't make the final cut of the episode.
Ooh, what is it?
It is when the Doctor and Lilith, one of the witches, was going to have a sword fight on stage at the Globe.
Honestly, that would have been kind of fun.
It would have, but I guess it was cut for practical reasons. Whatever
Makes
that
sense.
may be.
I guess, maybe.
Are you ready to jump into the episode?
Yes. So, what were your thoughts the first time you watched this episode?
That's a good question. I've always actually enjoyed this episode. I feel like it gets a lot of unnecessary hate, but I think it's a fun filler episode, mostly because I think the dynamic between Ten, Martha, and Shakespeare is just really fun and entertaining.
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of a hater for this episode.
Ooh.
For no good reason other than the first time I watched this, I didn't really like it. For whatever reason, I just had a hard time keeping focused the first time I watched this episode. And then, like, the villain of the week isn't, like, the greatest. I don't know. It's just, like, an episode that I always kind of, like, would skip on rewatches. But, like, it is a good filler episode. And I do really like the character dynamic. But, yeah, it's, like, not my favorite.
That's fair. I feel like this is one of those episodes where it's like, yeah, it's there. It happened.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you really got to say. It's definitely not the best, but it's definitely not the worst.
Yeah, for sure. I do really like Shakespeare, though, in this episode. And I do like the concept of them going to Shakespeare. And I like the concept that, like, the way the Globe Theatre was built, like, that's how these alien witches kind of, like, were able to do all that they could do. I find that interesting. But it's not an episode that sticks out to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's better than other episodes we get later on this series. But yeah, it's just a fun time. But I would agree that some aspects are kind of hard to follow. And the villains aren't the most interesting in the world. But it's a fun setting, fun time. I really like the actor who plays Shakespeare. He's just really fun.
He is, yeah.
And this is Martha Jones's first adventure in the TARDIS.
It is her first adventure, and the way it's her first adventure and Shakespeare was like in love with Martha, iconic.
Mm-hmm. I feel like no one ever goes to the past for their first adventure, so love that for her.
I was literally about to say Rose did, but I skipped the end of the world.
Speaking of, It is so unfair that Martha didn't get like a special outfit for this episode.
Oh my gosh, I know. Okay, because in the Unquiet Dead, Rose changed her outfit. Why did Martha not change her outfit? I'm so confused on why she didn't.
I know. Ten really did not care at all what was going on with Martha in this episode.
No, he really didn't. He was like, basically this entire episode, he was tired of explaining things, which is like, sir, You've chosen someone to travel with, and even if in your mind it's just like a small trip, she's gonna have questions. Prepare to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was annoyed answering the questions. The whole scene at the end, we'll get into that later, but yeah, Tana's just like not in it with Martha in this. I do really like the scene of them in the TARDIS flying around. That was really fun.
Oh, it's so fun. I love when 10 is just like clinging on to the TARDIS console because there's so much turbulence.
David really puts his all into flying the TARDIS, like arms everywhere, legs. He's doing the most.
He is, and I'm so curious how much of that is just improv on his end.
I also love that he said he failed his driver's test for the TARDIS.
Yeah, that was really funny. And like, honestly, we know.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Yeah, it's clear.
I love how excited Martha is when they exit the TARDIS and how she can't believe they traveled back in time. And I just love that she's so excited about it. What I don't love, and like, I don't know how much we'll like touch on this, but they find out that like they're in 1599 and Martha to 10 is like, hey, do I have to worry about taken away as a slave? And 10 responds literally by saying, just be confident, queen. Just act like you own the place and you'll be fine. And it's like, okay, but sir, there's a difference between 2007 and 1599.
Yeah, walking around like you own the place. Yeah, I bet that works really great for you. But for someone like Martha, that's not going to work as well. And I think the doctor now, presently, needs to go back and give Martha an apology, especially after everything that happened in season 14, specifically Dot and Bubble. So it's time we go see Martha and formally apologize.
No, literally. Because what was that?
No, insane. But I do love when he's like, why would they do that? Like, he's so shocked.
Yeah, that was funny. So, our villain of the week, monster of the week, are witches called Kyrianites. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think they're kind of a fun one-off villain. They could have definitely been given more, but I think they are kind of interesting, fun for this setting. It makes sense. Shakespeare, you're gonna do witches because of Macbeth. I do always like the one actress. I didn't write down her name, but I always really like her performance in this. I think she did a good job and she was fun to watch. But yeah, nothing, no one I need to see back again, but I do like them here in this setting.
Yeah, I also don't know how I feel about like their whole power is based upon words and how people are using them. Like, I like that concept, but that part very much feels like you just have to say a random like string of words to hopefully banish them.
Yeah, like the ending is just Shakespeare talking and using words and then they're gone. It's like, yeah, fun, power of words. But I don't know. I feel like that just could have been done better. It just is giving kind of lazy writing. I don't know.
No, I completely agree with that.
I love the scene when 10 and Martha first go to meet Shakespeare.
Yeah, that whole scene is really great and really funny, and how Shakespeare just immediately has his eyes set on Martha.
Oh, I know. And I love how quickly he clocks their tea. Like, he immediately understands what's going on. I love when he's talking to the doctor and he's like, how can a man so young have eyes that are so old?
I love that so much. And then he also asks the doctor, when are you going to stop your performance? And the doctor says, well, the world's a stage.
He really clocks them so quickly. I love it.
He also clocks that the psychic paper is psychic paper.
Yes.
And this is my question. Is that because he was being controlled by the witch aliens? Or is it just because he's a genius?
I think it's just because he's a genius.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, It always is crazy. I love that moment. And he can also tell that Martha and Ten are very new to each other. Like, he can tell that Martha's still trying to figure out the doctor and who he is.
For sure. So, a big part of the story with the witches in this episode is this little doll that the main one is carrying. And she basically just like gets a lock of whoever's hair she wants to mess with. Like, she gets a lock of their hair. And it's really creepy. It reminds me of a voodoo doll.
Definitely very creepy. The way the one guy dies by just drowning in the middle of the street is crazy.
The stuff of nightmares. Literally having your lungs full of water. Terrifying.
Yeah. I know. I love how Ten is like, well, we can't tell this lot that it's witchcraft. They'll like freak out.
Yeah.
And Martha's like, okay, well, then what is it? And he's like, witchcraft.
No, that part is so funny. So there's a scene in this episode where Ten and Martha have to share a bed because it's literally the only option. And Martha is just laying there, staring into his eyes, being all dreamy. And he's just laying there being like, I'm missing something. I'm missing something. You know who would know? Rose. Rose would know. Rose would be able to like tell me what's happening. And which is so true, by the way. And Martha is just so mad when he says that. And honestly, I feel for Martha. The first time I watched this episode, I was like, yes, Ten, yes. And now I'm like, poor Martha.
I know. I have mixed feelings about that moment. I love it because I love seeing the doctor thinking about Rose in the series. And it's like, she would know. Like, she would already be like talking with everyone there, figuring out what's going on. But it is so like unfair to Martha, and the way he treats her in this scene is just crazy. And she's like, well, where are we gonna sleep? And he's like, there's room, we'll just share. And she has to ask him to scoot over at one point. Like, he didn't even leave her enough room.
No, he didn't. And I feel like there's different moments in this episode where he just didn't treat Martha the way she deserved.
He also just gives her like a raw toothbrush from his coat.
No, that was so funny, but so random.
I know. I'd be like, I'm not using that. I don't know where that's been.
No, literally. I'm like, I don't know what planet or alien you got it from, but it's not going in my mouth.
Yeah, no thank you. And then one of the Carrionites visits Shakespeare while he's trying to write the end of Love Labors 1. She basically, what does she do? Like, kind of curse him to write the ending or something?
Like, puppeteers him.
Yeah.
Which is, like, really weird and creepy. Like, he's literally writing the play, but then they just knock him out and then, force him to write the ending so that they can basically have all the Carrionites come into the world so they can take over the world, which, like, I know that, like, every alien is intent on ruling the world, ruling Earth, and wants to take over everything, but, like, one of these days it would be really interesting to have a different motive.
I know. Now they just want to take over.
But poor Tolly Bailey.
I know.
She's killed by the witch because she caught the witch, and it's so sad.
It is so sad. And Shakespeare says that she, like, survived the plague in this place, and you know, what could have scared her? She had such a strong spirit, and it's really sad.
And then they find out that the architect of the Globe Theater started to go, quote unquote, mad. Like, it was said that he started hearing witch voices and babbling. So, of course, what are you going to do back then? You're going to throw someone like that in the madhouse, which, terrifying.
Oh my gosh, so bad.
It's like barbaric, like the madhouse. Like, it's called Bedlam. Is it called Bedlam Madhouse or Bedlam Hospital?
I don't know.
One of those. But Martha, Ten, Shakespeare, they all go to see the architect because they're like, the architect will be able to tell us what's going on and like what alien is messing with everything. And like, it's so barbaric in there.
No, it's insane. The guy working there is like, oh, I can whip a couple of them to give you a show if you like. And Ten is like, no. Actually, I would not like that.
Yeah. On a side note, like, it always is so sad doesn't even encompass what feelings this brings, but just like the thought of like back then, and honestly even not that long ago, if you were to share like you had anything going on mentally, like you were tossed in the madhouse.
Oh yeah.
Which is just so sad and awful to think of. And you know, things aren't perfect now, but they're a lot better than they were.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me when Shakespeare says how he was having a really bad time, but fear of that place kind of brought him out of it.
Yeah.
Talks about how much pain he was when his son died.
Yeah, which is so sad.
Something that people talk about is that they don't like historicals when there's like big historical figure in the episode. And I can kind of agree with that in some aspects, but this is one where I actually do really like it. I really like how Shakespeare's used throughout this episode. And I like learning like little bits about his life, like in moments like that.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I feel like there are definitely historical episodes out there that aren't the greatest with a big historical figure, but I feel like even though Tooth and Claw wasn't like our favorite episode, we both love Queen Victoria in it. And then in the future, I can think of another historical figure that we love that we got to see. So, yeah, it's always cool when they pull it off really well. And I do think they pulled off Shakespeare really well in this episode.
Definitely. And they just really got the dynamic between the three characters, Ten, Martha, and Shakespeare, really well.
They did. Honestly, it would be kind of fun to see Shakespeare travel. For like one episode, though.
They should have given him like his little Charles Dickinson moment. Let him see the TARDIS at the end.
Oh my gosh. Although he would have never shut up about it and would have probably written a play about it.
Oh, definitely. I love the running bit throughout this episode of, ooh, I might use that.
Yeah, all of that's really funny. And at one point, Tin says something and then he's like, you can't use that, Shakespeare. Someone already used it, which is funny. But when they're in the madhouse, they meet Peter, the architect of the Globe Theater, and he's like non-responsive. So Tin just like puts his hand, I don't know if he's telepathically communicating, relaxing the dude's mind. I don't know exactly what Tin was doing, but Peter starts talking briefly. And then a witch appears because the witches were very, very mad that Tin was poking around and potentially messing with their plan of the performance the next day.
Did they kill him? Did I miss that?
Yeah, they killed him. They killed Peter.
And it's in this moment that the Doctor figures out who they are.
They are Carianites.
I really like the aspect of this episode that the name has like power over them, and you can name them and it like does something to them, and they can name you and it can kind of like kill you, and except for Martha, she's out of her time, so it doesn't kill her. It's very interesting. I kind of like that aspect.
Yeah, it is a very interesting concept for sure.
I love that scene when they go to the witch's house and they meet Lilith, the younger witch, and Martha tries to name her, but it doesn't work because it can only be done once. And then Martha passes out and she tries to like do something to the Doctor, and she finds that name doesn't work. But there is one name that she can use on him.
Yes, there is. And the way it's phrased is very like Shakespeare wordsmith vibes. But she says, there's still one word with a power that aches. Rose. And Tin says, big mistake, because that name keeps me fighting.
Oh, I love that moment from him. It's so good. I always love that moment. I can't get over it.
Me either. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. I always gag at it. But then she takes a lock of his hair, which I don't even know why he let her get close enough to get a lock of his hair.
I know.
And because of that, she adds it to her little doll thing, and like he falls down dead. But then Martha is like, oh my gosh, that's right. You have two hearts. And yeah.
And then she has to try to like beat his heart back into working.
Yeah. And he's like, how do you guys even function with one heart? Which is like so funny.
It's such a great bit.
And then him and Martha are off, like running to the theater to like figure out what's going on now. And I love when Martha's like, we're going the wrong way. And Tim's like, no, we're not. And then they both turn around and run the other way. Tim's like,
I love that moment. Amir's that same thing in Doomsday.
That's what I was
Ghost.
thinking.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Same. And the witches all think Ten is dead because they didn't realize he's the Time Lord with two hearts. And they go crazy. Like, they go literally insane trying to take over the world. And it's very creepy.
Oh, yeah. No, it's crazy. Everything. I love when Martha and Ten are running back to the Globe Theater, and then the guy who's shouting about the end of the world is like, I told you it was happening.
I didn't even notice him.
Oh, yeah.
That's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
But like the conclusion to get rid of the Carianites is Shakespeare, and Ten tells Shakespeare to basically come up with words because he's a genius and a wordsmith to banish them.
Yeah, he's like, just talk, basically. And I don't know, it's very kind of easy way to wrap up the episode.
A very, very easy way. Like, how did Ten even know that Shakespeare would say the right words?
I know, like, could you have said anything and it would have worked? Is it because it's Shakespeare that it worked? Did Shakespeare just happen to find the right words? And they just threw in a Harry Potter spell in there, which is just ridiculous. Yeah,
I don't love that conclusion. Like you said earlier, it feels a little lazy. I don't know. I would have liked it to be more clear, but thankfully the witches are then banished into like that crystal ball that Ten takes into the TARDIS at the end. And I just want to say, the amount of aliens and who knows what that's in the TARDIS that's just stored there like that.
Yeah.
I don't even know the number.
Oh, me either. There's so much going on in there. We really need we kind of got it in Journey to the Center of the TARDIS, but we really need just a whole episode exploring all the bits and pieces in the TARDIS because there's a lot going on.
There's so much going on. We need to see more of the rooms, especially the wardrobe, please.
Please. Yeah, please.
But can we talk about at the end how Shakespeare is flirting with Martha and being like, I compare thee to a summer's day. And Ten in the background just rolls his eyes.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love how Martha calls him out. She's like, I know you have a wife in the countryside.
But then he responds by saying, but this is the town. But I do love how Martha stayed strong through it all. And even when he's trying to kiss her at the end, she's like,
your breath stinks.
Yeah, which, like, good for you, queen.
This episode does acknowledge one forgotten truth, which is that the past smelled really bad because they didn't have indoor plumbing, no dental hygiene. Everyone just kind of smelled really bad. And that comes up a little bit in this episode, and I think that's really funny.
No, it's so funny. I always forget about that part of history for good reason.
Yeah, I try not to think about it.
No, literally, me either. Can we talk about at the end how Queen Elizabeth I just like comes into the Globe Theater and is like, Doctor, you're an enemy. Off with his head.
Oh, I love that moment. Yeah, because earlier Shakespeare was like, you never know when the queen might show up. And then he's like, well, she never does. And then she finally decides to show up. And Ten is all like, Queen Elizabeth I. And she's like, Doctor, my sworn. It's such a good moment. I guess it was Russell that suggested they add that moment.
Yeah, that feels like a very Russell thing to do.
It does.
And it's like touched on later on.
Yeah, I love that we never figure out what that was until way later in the 50th.
No, I know.
No, that's just such a great moment. And I love the last shot of the episode. And Ten is explaining that's the problem with time travel. You meet people out of order. And then he's like, still something to look forward to. And then he has to quickly close the door as they're shooting arrows at the TARDIS.
It is so, so great and so funny. There are some really funny moments and lines in
Mm-hmm.
this episode, and that's one of them for sure. But yeah, all in all, this episode, on a future rewatch, I don't know if I'll bother watching it, but I mean, it's also not the worst.
Yeah, I always watch it. I never skip it. I have a fun time. It's just kind of one that you can turn on, have in the background. Like I said, I really enjoy Shakespeare and the dynamic between the three of them. I kind of like a little bit what's going on with the Carrianite, and I do really like that scene between one of the Karenites and 10. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, definitely not the strongest. What are some things that just don't work for you in this episode?
For me, it's definitely the conclusion with the Carrionites. And I just wish like the whole word thing had been a little bit more clear, or that maybe there was like a sequence to it, or like, I don't know exactly, but I would have liked something different. I think also the bulk of my problem is like the Care Knights in this episode. Like, they're just not that interesting to me. Like, in theory, they are. Like, I do like the concept of like witches who are actually aliens in Doctor Who. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
find that so interesting. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I don't care enough about them.
No, I completely agree. I feel like they're a little underutilized. They're kind of just kept in their own corner of the episode, and they don't really, obviously they're part of the main plot, but they just could have been doing more. A
Yeah.
lot of this episode does kind of feel very slow. It's a lot of just 10, Martha and Shakespeare walking around talking,
Mm-hmm.
with moments of seeing the Carrionites, but I think they could have intermixed the two groups a little bit more, made the episode a little more action packed and exciting instead of leaving it all towards the end. They could have had that confrontation earlier and just, I don't know, done more, I guess. And I agree, like the whole word sequencing, it doesn't take me out of the episode, but it's definitely not the strongest.
Same.
We need to talk about how at the end Shakespeare really clocks them and he figures out 10 is from another planet, just like the Carrionites, and Martha's from the future.
Yeah, he does clock them accurately, which is not something we usually get, but
Mm-hmm.
I like that he clocked that. And yeah, I don't know, it was very fitting
It
for him.
was. It makes sense. Who is the star of the show?
Star of the show is definitely Shakespeare.
I agree.
He's charismatic for sure. He did keep my attention. Like, he's the one I had my
Mm-hmm.
attention on the whole time, and I like the Martha 10 Shakespeare dynamic.
Yeah, I think the portrayal of Shakespeare works really well. It's engaging. He fits with 10 and Martha really well. It's really fun. Definitely the strongest part of the episode.
I completely agree.
What is the heart of the episode?
Hmm. Actually, I have no clue. Do you have any ideas?
The heart of the episode is if you meet Queen Elizabeth and she says that you are her sworn enemy, and then years later you decide to marry Queen Elizabeth, why? You could have stopped that whole thing from happening.
No, exactly.
It all comes around in the end.
Yes, it does.
Do we have any reviews from the past?
Yes, we have a couple. So, this first review is from IMDb and it was written on April 7th, 2007 by the user DVD underscore connoisseur. And they had a lengthy review, so I'm just going to read a portion of it. But they said, "This episode is truly impressive in the visual effects department.
Hmm.
Filmed partly in the rebuilt Globe Theater and on location, there's a real sense of scale. Everything is lit beautifully and the effects are gorgeous. The CGI produced Carrionites are a great design, reminding me a little of the terrifying Reapers from Eccleston's Father's Day."
Ah.
Yeah. And later on, they say, "Despite its strengths, there are one or two areas where the episode didn't gel as well as it could have. Perhaps I'm being unsympathetic, but I'm growing a little tired of the Doctor's references to Rose.
I never get tired of it. I don't care.
Same. Hopefully these will soon become a thing of the past.
Oh.
Also, Tennant can be just a tad annoying at times. Having said this, he's a great Doctor, and every incarnation of the Time Lord has had the ability to be a little annoying in certain situations. Overall, an enjoyable episode and a strong 8 out of 10.
That is something, the effects are really good in this episode, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I think the set designs and costumes work really well, and you really feel like you're in 1599. It just works really well.
It does, but it would have worked out even better if Martha was in.
I know. They should have given Martha a historical costume.
For real. The other review I have is by the user Dr. Wordsmith. They wrote on April 15th, 2007, that this is the second, technically third episode of Doctor Who Series 3, and by now, the series should be really getting into the swing of things. But this episode still lacks certain elements that made the last series so successful. Normally, the Back in Time episodes with the famous person are the best episodes of the series, but this is a disappointment compared to them. It was action-packed, that's for sure, and it featured a fairly clever recreation of Elizabethan England. However, on the whole, the episode was rather silly and just not anything, really. It was a slight improvement over the terribly rushed Smith and Jones.
Oh.
But the series still has a long way to go if it wants to top the Amazing Series 2.
Interesting.
Very interesting, because I feel like, I don't know for everyone else, but I know me and Rebecca feel that, like, Series 2 episode and story-wise is not the strongest.
Yeah, I would definitely say that Series 3 is stronger overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like the series is dragging at all. It makes sense where it is right now. We're only 2 episodes in, really.
Exactly.
Any final thoughts before we go?
Just that I am so excited to cover the next episode.
Yes, we will be back next week to talk about Gridlock, which puts an end to what I call the end of the world trilogy.
Yes, it does, sadly. But yeah, I'm so excited for it. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at TimeyWimeyPod.
And email us anything and everything to timeyimeypod@gmail.com.
And don't forget to give us a review on your podcast platform. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye.
Ta-ra!